Headquarters here in Washington. I sat down with Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan, and I began by asking him what the forecast track is showing.
Right. So the latest forecast, the storm is hitting the northern islands of the Bahamas right now. They're starting to experience hurricane force winds. It will go across the northern islands of the Bahamas, and then we expect it to stall out. Most models show it stalling out about 60 miles offshore, not making landfall. But that doesn't mean it's not dangerous. In fact, we expect hurricane force winds to potentially hit the coast of Florida, and then a prolonged rain event combined with storm surge that's going to be very difficult as the storm starts to move northward, most likely up the coast of Florida and toward Georgia and South Carolina.
But at this point, you're pretty sure it will not hit North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida?
The National Hurricane Center says that most of the models show it staying offshore and moving slowly north, but that means the storm effect will be prolonged on the coastline. A rain event, storm surge, and hurricane force winds potentially.
Because this was so hard to predict, this
Right.
hurricane, are there concerns that people will just stay in their homes, they won't get out of their homes, they won't take precautions?
Right. We want people to listen to the state and local emergency managers, listen to the evacuation orders, make sure you're prepared, make sure you have 7 days of supplies, medicine, food, even pet food. Really be thinking about all those things that you might need for a prolonged event. So we want people to listen to state and locals and be very aggressive in watching the storm.
And you've got President Trump coming here
Right.
this morning. What do you tell him? What are you doing here in the center today?
Well, so we've had lots of time to prepare for the length of the storm as it's approaching the American coastline. So we're going to have all of the elements of the U.S. government, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Transportation, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Health and Human Services. It's really a whole of government effort, and the President's going to make sure that we're on the same page, that we're tracking this, and that we're going to be ready.
And do you expect any mandatory evacuations in those areas?
So that's a state and local decision on mandatory evacuations, but yes, as the storm gets closer, there will be counties that will likely face a mandatory order. There's already some that are under voluntary evacuation orders now.
And FEMA came under fire, as we all know, in 2017 for the handling of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. Can you guarantee that your agency is prepared for this storm?
So I can guarantee that FEMA and all of our federal partners are doing everything they can to support our state and local partners that manage and execute the emergency response. We have had a lot of time for pre-position resources and assets, urban search and rescue teams, our incident management and assistance teams in Florida and Georgia. We're still assessing the damage in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. It's better than originally anticipated, obviously. But yes, we are fully prepared and ready to support the state and locals to respond to the storm.
And I know Pete Gaynor, who was just walking us through this facility, the acting FEMA administrator, told Congress back in June that the agency was struggling to ensure that it had enough disaster responders in reserve and was down about 1,000 employees. Has that been fixed?
That has been fixed, and we have 3,000 people already deployed across the federal government agencies for this storm. About half of those are direct FEMA employees. Again, those urban search and rescue teams and IMATs are already in place. But we've got a very experienced emergency response leadership team with the acting administrator, Pete Gaynor, with Jeff Byard overseeing ops. These guys have done it at the state and local level. They've done it at the federal level. It's a battle-hardened team right behind me here in the NRCC who's dealt with the storms in 17 and 18. So we're ready.
And you talk about it not making landfall, but there's sustained winds, there's rain. What are the concerns about the power grid in these areas?
So, yeah, there'll be power outages, no question, and people need to be prepared for that. There will be storm surge, and unfortunately, this storm's arrival aligns with what's called the king tide, one of the times of the year when the tide's the highest in the southeastern United States. So that means a storm surge and some of the coastal flooding could be more significant. That's something we're watching closely and worried about. But a prolonged period where there's a rain event, where there's a wind event, and storm surge combined could have really complicated results for some of the coastal counties from Florida up to South Carolina.
And I want to ask you about these funds that were transferred. Homeland Security informed Congress in July that you will transfer $100